I look at these experiences as energetic keys that unlock the door to another realm. And once you're given the key one time, you can actually go back there and play in that world.
The experiencer in the shared death experience is not dying. They are merely getting a peek. This force is there to manage this great transition that we will all go on. And the minute I realized, oh, that's the force, that's the conductor. And I could feel the majesty, feel the power, and feel the intentionality. Trust this life. And that includes death.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever experienced something out of the ordinary when a loved one died or heard stories from others, then do we have the At Heaven's Door show for you. Today I'll be talking with William Peters, creator of the Shared Death Experience Initiative and the author of a brilliant book on the topic, At Heaven's Door. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about our angels, guides, and the gift of shared death experiences and what they mean for you. That, plus we'll talk about Raymond Moody, Liz and twins, skiing accidents, who in the world is the conductor, and what on the earth intense birdsong has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, William. Are you ready to shine?
I sure am, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much for being here in a mighty woohoo. We have a lot to talk about today. Both of us are twin, can I say that? Twin NDE, I don't know if survivor is the right term, experiencers, some things. We've been down the rabbit hole a little bit, but we're also going to talk about shared death experience. And so I guess the first question is, what is a shared death experience or a shared crossing?
Yeah. So a shared death experience occurs when a loved one, caregiver, and sometimes a bystander reports that they've shared in the journey with somebody dying through this passage that leads from this human life into the afterlife. So there's various points along the way. It's like a landscape that the dying go through, and the caregiver loved ones will gain access to some part of that journey and sometimes to all of it. That means they see the landscape, they see the angels or guides that are there to greet them, deceased relatives often appear. It is very similar to the near-death experience, and that makes sense because we're going into a similar terrain, except of course the perspective is different because the experiencer in the shared death experience is not dying. They are merely getting.
You mentioned something that's kind of mind-blowing, and I need to step back and I need to repeat that and then figure out where to go with this question. You said they may experience some of it. They may experience all of it. How far down the rabbit hole, because you've done extensive research on this, and I want to ask you about that in a minute. How far down the rabbit hole have you found anyone able to go, and is there always some sort of a terminal limit where they can't go beyond?
Yeah, great question. And that limit is typically the light. When they get up close to the light, that's when they realize that's as far as they can go. That's as far as we've seen anyone go. Unlike a near-death experience, there are people like myself who actually went into the light, stopped in that light, had a conversation with God, and came back. We don't have any shared death experiencers that go into the light that I'm aware of. This is 220 cases we've looked at deeply. They come up close to it, but they do not enter that light. Now, that's not to say that they turn around or hit a limit, as you said. We call it a boundary somewhere else in that space. But an actual boundary would be like they can't go any further. And that happens quite frequently anywhere along the journey when, you know what I'll tell you, what's interesting is the biggest boundary point happens when the dying are reunited with deceased loved ones or guides. At that point, they realize, oh, I'm going on, and their loved one, who's the shared death experiencer, is not. And there's usually some sort of acknowledgement, usually very brief. Thank you, I love you, goodbye. And the experiencer comes right back immediately into their human body.
Have you seen experiences? So you've researched 220, is that correct?
Up to this point, 225, more than that, but to be really conservative. Now, in the book, to be really clear, I was working with 134 cases.
Very, very cool. And that's your shared crossing project.
That's the Shared Crossing Research Initiative, which is the research arm of the project. Yes.
Excellent. So has anyone been able to see a life review or a council of elders or anything of the sort?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go to the two dominant features here, because so keep in mind the dominant motif in the shared death experience, which we'll call it the SDE, is journey. So it's journey, and the other piece of it is relationship. In other words, these are strong relationships that facilitate this type of connection. The way I say it is the relationship is strong, so the SDE experiencer hitches a ride in some way on the dying person and gets that view into where they're going. So the most common feature we see is just over half of the experiencers report seeing the dying, it's the person himself. So that may not seem like that big of a deal, but it is. If you're the experiencer, you get to see the dying. You get to experience them. You get to feel them. You have a series of different experiences. All the experiences are different. The other thing you get to see in 16% of the cases is you get to see elevated beings. So these are the angels, the spirit guides. You mentioned council of elders. We often see groups of elevated beings, obviously non-human, often called beings of light, and they seem to be, guiding this process in some way. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later, this conductor force. Now, the last thing I'll say is deceased relatives are also there that are recognized, and we see that in about 15, just shy of 15% of our cases.
So I put on it's interesting because clearly these are messages coming from the heart, not from the head. But I have put on my thinking cap about this because I like to look at the grand design of the ghost behind the machine, so to speak. What's really going on? And so clearly there are many reasons that Spirit Source Universe has gifted us with the shared death experience, and for many, gifted the person who is transitioning with the experience as well. There can be a hand in hand, and I'll start crying in a minute even before we get there. But I also wonder if that council of elders, if those, as you call them, elevated beings, if the angels on the other side are aware of our presence and are gifting us with messages to bring back as well.
This is a great question, and one that I have been, focused on. And when we talk to the experiencers in our research, every experience is different. So sometimes those beings won't be there. There'll be other phenomena. You mentioned life reviews come up. But when these experiences when these guides at the other side are there, or these other perceived forces are there, the question I'm asking is, who knows what? In other words, does the dying actually know that this is, going on? Like, first of all, who initiates this? Does the dying initiate this?
You even mentioned it in the book. You said that that in many ways it's a loved one or somebody who is chosen to accompany. On what level does that happen? Is it conscious? That's where you're going?
Yeah, well, and this is the mystery here, because if you can imagine a deathbed scene with 4 or 5 family members there, and just say I'm thinking of a situation just a few weeks ago, and the mother is dying, a husband is present, there are 3 kids, all just young adults, and one of the daughters has the shared death experience, but no one else does. What's that about? That's the question for me, is like, and for the researchers on my team, is like, who initiates this? Why her? Is there something about her particular, spiritual, psycho-emotional makeup that allows her receptive? Or is the mother who's transitioning reaching out to her for some special reason? And then why not reach out to everybody? But I'll tell you, it is rare when at a deathbed scene, everybody gets a shared death experience with the dying. And it's mysterious. Although if you look deeper into who gets the shared death experience, invariably, if you talk to the family members, it goes something like this. Well, if there was somebody who needed to have the shared death experience, it was Janine.
That's exactly where I was going. Not for Janine, but I was going, oh, we get exactly what we need for our journey. I was doing a live event last night, and I have a special relationship, where you can say, with the angels at this point, from all of the channeling work I've done, though I don't regularly see them. And somebody would say, well, Michael, you've worked with them so much. Why don't you see them? Others see them. You get what you need for your journey. So the person who was able to share that experience got what she, mainly more she than he, but she or he needs. And those who did not even got what they needed as well.
We hope that's the case. And typically when I work with people, because I'm a psychotherapist working in grief and bereavement, end of life. So in a number of these cases where one person who's had the experience, they may come and see me, and then they'll say something like, but my brother didn't have this experience and he's really upset. And I said, well, let's bring him in. And then I work with him, and what invariably he says, and I'm thinking of a case here with Francis where his sister had the SDE, but he did not. And he said so beautifully, he said, I got to spend a lot of time with my mother at the end of life, but Margaret did not. And so it made sense to me that Margaret, who was only there for a few days with my mother, was able to have the shared death experience. And so if you really work with it and get into your open heart and say, what's the highest good for all involved here? It seems to me there is this divine hand at play, as you say, giving people what they need. But I will say this, it seems to me that they can't get to everybody. There are people who die, and I will, like in Santa Barbara, kind of a really lovely matron of our city died. And there's probably a dozen people who had some sort of visit from her, either at the time of death or soon after, including her daughter, me, my daughter, number of family and friends. So there are some people who somehow have this capability. Now, I may say, I don't want to put a feather in my cap, but I had worked with her for a very long time. She had taken all of our training programs about everything that I've learned about how you can enable these experiences, work with the dying, teaching the dying, how it is when you cross over and go through this huge energetic shift, how it is that you can turn your attention, call back to your loved ones, call them to where you are to let them know that you're safe, well cared for, and happy.
So, William, you are the Yoda that we see behind you.
Aspiring Yoda.
And it sounds like, I'll give you even more credit than that, it sounds like to me sort of like teaching someone to have a lucid dreaming experience, that you would give them markers or train them. When you have this thought or this experience, it will trigger a reaction to look back.
That's exactly right. And in the trainings, we do a series of, they're basically guided visualizations. I take them through that landscape. And I should say, with my 2 near-death experiences and probably a couple dozen shared death experiences, the landscape is more energetic. There's some visuals for sure, but it's largely sensing and feeling. But when you get to these certain points and you see certain things or you experience certain things, that's the tag, turn around. And I really embed that into the dying so that they're reminded to do that.
As we were discussing this, tears were starting to flow in me, and I can't believe how close to the surface they are. And that just means my heart is wide open. Means I don't even have the words for it. we had, so, and this is the first few chapters of your book just tore me apart, William. And I'm saying to my wife, Jessica, I'm like, you're not allowed to read this. You are just not allowed to read this. She's like, what? Tell me. I'm like, no. We had identical twins. We after 3 miscarriages, we were gifted with identical twin girls in Jessica's womb. Until, I don't know, all the weeks, everything's a blur right now. In fact, this beautiful home that you see us in on a beautiful lake is to keep us close to the hospital that we had to go to, and we may need to still go to. With that said, when things went down, and with babies, sometimes they can go down quickly, or in the womb. We were faced with a decision that wasn't a decision. We were told it was likely minutes, hours before one of our 2 girls was going to expire. And if she expired in the womb, it would likely take our other girl with her, or leave her with brain damage or cerebral palsy or some other very serious conditions. And we had to choose to let our girl, we had named them already, because we're well along, Hana and Miraku. We had to choose, Miraku meaning miracle, to let Miracle go in order to bring Hana through. And the way it all worked out, the mechanics of it was, for some reason, we were able to get over the miscarriage hump by having twins, and that got us through the hurdle. But nothing was set up to be able to actually carry twins to term. So we had to decide to let our baby girl Miraku go. And it all came about very quickly, but we were very grounded, communicating with the angels in the silence, in the space, and we knew this was the right thing. They wheeled my wife off to surgery, and I got to sit in the first hospital room that she was in. Then they wheeled me to another one, or didn't wheel me. They gave me another one, and I sat in meditation, and I can remember the exact minute, the exact moment, where the best way to describe it is lift off. Not me lifting off. I had her surrounded by angels. I had archangels. I had my guardian angel. I had her guardian angel. And her guardian angel took her hand in hand, and it's as if she was wearing like a bell-shaped dress that swishes back and forth. And the 2 of them took off. And it was actually a moment, I'm crying, but it was actually a moment of pure joy. Because I knew she was going to be all right. She was already communicating with our automatic writing and stuff. I had never stopped communicating with her. So I already knew what she was thinking, what she was feeling, why she came in. I knew everything, but it's a very different thing when you see takeoff. And she, or her guardian angel, I know it was both, were letting me know, I'm all right, Daddy. I'm great. and the little kicker is, I'll be back. Is what I was getting. But that's my limited experience. But going through your book today, and it was a very profound experience, but going through your book brought it to, and this is why I know you're doing this work, brought it to a higher level of realness, if that makes any sense to it. I believe a lot more people have had these experiences than are willing to share or shut them down, don't even let themselves feel it. And so I didn't shut myself down, but going through your book, I think I'm feeling it to a whole new level now.
Thank you for saying that. And because what you're giving voice to is exactly what we hear in our interviews, is that people have these experiences, and we ask, how many times have you shared this experience? And they often say, I've shared it maybe once, maybe twice. at most a few times with just the most trusted people. And even when they share with their most trusted friends, family, even if they're spiritual, these experiences aren't well known yet. We are on the frontier of breaking open an experience that I agree with you. I know when I give my talks that people come up to me. Pre-COVID, I would give a talk at a conference, maybe 100 people, a couple dozen would come up and say, I need to talk to you. They would never raise their hand during the lecture. They'd say, I need to talk to you. And give me your card. Can we talk? So, and then we never had any trouble getting, the cases that we have. We call them cases. The experiencers who had these experiences, and so they're definitely out there. And I'm going to say this boldly. I think it's in the millions, perhaps tens of millions of people like the near-death experience.
Oh, now learning it's millions who've had near-death experience. It's not as unique as we ever thought it was.
No, 5% of the population, which would in North America, would suggest 15 to 20 million people. So, and I see no reason why the shared death experience would not be more common than the near-death experience, because death happens so frequently. And as we know, I mean, you're a perfect example. You're as open of a spiritual man that I have talked to. And I would be surprised if you have shared this experience with that many people. Maybe you have. You'd be very unique.
On air, because these are my homies. And
okay, well, good.
So on air, but, I don't go to my neighbor and say, if the topic comes up, we had twins. We now have baby Hannah coming through. Miraku came to help baby Hannah come through, and I watched Miraku take off. I leave that part out of the story.
Okay. Well, just to be really clear about your story with Miraku, is that this sense, the way you described it was just, this is almost, we'd say, clinically perfect, because this sense of rising up, I don't know if you felt any.
I felt the rising up. I felt the spinning up. This was not me going on the journey. There was not that, but I felt that. But I also felt incredible peace and even joy. And so when they wheeled her back in and I heard that Hannah is okay, I did not go to mourning, even though I had just lost a child. It was conflicted, in fact, but there was a sense of woohoo.
Yeah. And you're also giving voice to another phenomena that makes the shared death experiencer a bit of an albatross in our grief culture, because frequently we hear, yes, I lost my partner of 50 years, but I saw him received by these beings of light. I knew that he recognized them. They were there to help him and comfort him. I gave my beloved to these beings. I knew, not didn't think, I knew he was going home. And he looked back and he let me know that. And then that was it. And so here this person is, I'm thinking of one person, but this is dozens. Here I am, everyone's trying to, give me the long eyes and the sorrow. We're so sorry you lost your partner of 50 years. And she's like holding back her laughter, saying, are you kidding? You know what? I was lucky, gifted to have that life with him. He was suffering from cancer. It was his time. I learned all this through the shared death experience, that I would see him again. He's going to be just fine. Life goes on. They'll help me with my grief. All of no more fear of death. I understand it all. All the wisdom and knowledge about the purpose of a human life sitting inside a larger context of many realms of existence. This is what the experiencer gets. So when they come back, they feel loss of that person not in their life anymore, for sure. But the larger context is just what you said, a sense of joy and kind of an understanding that this is the way it goes.
I have a school called the School of Mystics, and we teach about how you can live on both sides of the veil. But the experience you're describing, that does it right there. You still get to figure out how to embody that and live it on a daily basis, but you're now given the gift of the big picture.
That's right. And that's exactly it. And that's why one of the big, we call it, positive after effects of a shared death experience is that people come back with a renewed sense, a type of an awakening to what a human life is about, not just generally, but specifically for them. So there's the general knowing that the human life sits inside this larger context of many dimensional existences, but then the specifics for them. Oh, in this life, I need to do this. And a lot of times it's like these, a lot of times it's doing the work that, you and I are doing and others like us, these light workers that are trying to bring truth and understanding and love and trust in the universe and life itself. So people come back and devote themselves to that type of living. It's hard too. I know you've had a couple near-death experiences. I know after my experiences, it always demanded that I make some major shifts in my life or I would fall out of integrity and suffer in that lack of integrity. So it meant that, I had to give up the kind of the mainstream path of becoming, whatever that would be.
Well, the term that I use, and I'm a good bleeper here, but the term that I use is integration as a you may know whatever you know, and it's still only a fraction of everything, but you may know that, but your physiology is still your physiology. I have no fear of death. I have, in a sense, a fear of things not working out the way I'd like them to, attachment in this lifetime, and that's neurological, that's biological. There are neural pathways, neurons that fire together, wire together, and we're not just talking about my lifetime, millions of lifetimes to run from the tiger. And you come back here and that neurophysiology still exists.
I humbly affirm everything you've just said because I find myself coming back from, if I'm at the bedside and I have a shared death experience. I remember having a profound shared death experience with a gentleman in hospice when I was working in San Francisco in Zen Hospice. And here I am, I'm working in San Francisco, just had this out-of-body experience with Ron, who's on the bed. I pop out of my body when I'm reading him a story, and we're there together, and he's looking at me. He'd been suffering for, weeks. It was fortunate that he was dying at this time. And he looks over at me and he says, "Check this out, William. This is where I've been. This is where I'm going. This is great. Thank you for, having cared for me as a hospice worker." And I'm just lit up with like joy beyond joy. It's like, wow. And of course, having had my other near-death experiences, I knew this space pretty well. So I wasn't doubting. I was like, okay, been here. This is spectacular. Thank you, Ron. He died, a couple of days later. But on my way home from San Francisco, I get caught in a traffic jam on the Bay Bridge. And you know what? And all of a sudden I get a call. I've got to be somewhere. And I'm like, I find myself like back in my human body, back in my human life, back in the material world. And quite frankly, back to a bit of my miserable personality trait of being a Virgo and wanting to get things right all the time. And I'm like, I am back in suffering. And I stop. I'm just like, wait a minute. A half an hour ago, you were just with Ron on the other side, feeling the joy and the truth and the majesty of life and death and the continuation of existence. And here you are suffering in a traffic jam. So it's funny, but that's what we are. As human beings, we're rather comical at times.
You mentioned, thank you for sharing, and you tripwired something. So we're going way off path, but it's perfectly on path. You talked about visualization earlier to help people so that they get it when they're on the other side. I look at these experiences, and we can call it an SDE, we can call it an NDE, we can call it whatever, an awakening experience. But I look at them as energetic keys that unlock the door to another realm. And once you're given the key one time, you can actually go back there. And so I'm wondering how much you play in kind of the energy of that liminal space, Ron's world, we'll call it, where you go back and have that experience again in meditation or visualization of being with Ron or being with someone else and play in that world.
Great question. So let me back up and say my first near-death experience, 17 years old, high speed.
Which is a key.
Yeah, that was a key. And I went all the way to the light, the whole deal.
And that was a skiing accident.
Now it was a skiing accident. I did not think of that experience for, I think, 10 years. Wasn't even in my cultural reality as a suburban kid outside Silicon Valley in California.
But let me pause you for one sec, just for people, to give them a little bit of, oh, forgive me, oh God, backstory, which is, I don't know if we call it, well, yeah, it was broken back. It was all sorts of things broken to where you shouldn't have existed. And someone on the other side, pulled out the equivalent of the lightsaber, going, yeah, da-da-da-dee, and did some healing work. And you were able to actually get up. And, the next morning you found yourself in the hospital going, oh God. But they did some work on you that kept you alive.
Yeah, I definitely felt like, so the high-speed skiing accident crushed my low spine. I catapulted out of my body. This is the first NDE at 17 years old, flew away from my body. It was beautiful, and I'm in that space. There's no pain outside the body. I'm enamored by this beautiful solar system, planet Earth, like a satellite view. I have a past life review, which was illuminating, let me know that I could do a lot better in this life. But I was 17 years old. Who gets a good report card after 17 years? So, and then I went to the light, and in that light, I was right in the light, and I was pleading to come back. I had a sense that I had to do or be something here. That was that clarity of, wow, I've been in this space after life hundreds, if not thousands of times, and I had not completed my mission, if you will. I use that loosely, but the idea that we come to an incarnation in the human form to be or do something. And I hadn't completed that. Well, God, gave me another chance. I came back. I would be in chronic pain and limitation for about 35, almost 40 years as a result of that. But you said something I want to answer directly. That frequency that I experienced there made me empathically able to attune to all sorts of things that I never felt in attune before, just being with spiritual people or being with love. It was like heightened. Now, all of a sudden, having been into that light, I think something happened to my soul, spirit, that opened it up and made it sense. Like I came back with an alive heart and soul for empathy, for feeling that I don't think I had previously. I just don't think I had it. But the other thing about it was, anytime I was around death and dying, and as it turns out, I would end up working in Central and South America, doing service work in 2 civil wars. I mean, you get the synchronicities here. Death and destruction all around. And I am just attuning to all this. Now, the empathy I had, I think, came from that experience, but it was energetic. In a certain sense, like I would just be with somebody or near somebody who was suffering in pain and close to death, and I would just light up. My world would get more focused. The physical world would get blurry. I would have heightened sensations, and I would, if they would transition, I would feel that pressure you referred to. With Miraku, that kind of rising up, I'd feel the gravitational pull on my soul spirit going up. And then my consciousness would go into another dimension. I'd be hyper aware of presences, all these presences. Sometimes I couldn't see them, but I always felt some entity was there guiding, supporting. And it was usually for them, not for me. It was usually for the dying. So this attunement is kind of a transmission. I think that these experiences, like the shared death experience and the near-death experience, they transmit something to us. They change our energetic structure and attune us to these capacities and to anybody who's transitioning out of the human dimension into what lies beyond.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. That actually, you just opened 2 key doors here for myself and for others. First off, and you talk about the history of this and civilization, Sumeria, Mu, going back thousands and thousands of years. there have been other, maybe just Western civilizations that have a challenge with this, or maybe it's the whole world today. But in the past, I'm going to use a term of Ram Dass's, I believe civilizations snuggled up with death and snuggled up with the dying. Here, at least in the West, let's stop them off to the side. Let's keep our elders because we don't want to see that and know what's coming for us. But what you're saying is, it doesn't have to be the NDE. It can be the shared death experience of being there at the last moment that will crack you open so that you live a completely different way. And what a different world it would be if we went to the school of the shared death experience that past civilizations have.
I couldn't agree more. 100% is that we as modern people have pushed death to the margins. We are just now, recently, with the hospice movement, allowing death to be brought back into our families and communities. There was a time in the 40s and 50s and it's a beautiful advance of modern medicine, but the idea was that modern medicine could save us. And there's still that hope as well. And I mean, I would be clear here. I think our modern medical system is outstanding for what they can do to support our human bodies. But that has been pushed to an extreme where people too often are saying, especially with terminal diagnoses, I'm just going to get another treatment and wait for the cure. I'll just buy time to get to the cure. Well, the problem with that is you're missing out on an ability or an opportunity to be conscious, connected, and loving with yourself, with your loved ones, and opening up to what lies beyond for you. If we're under stress and hooked up in a hospital to, life prolonging interventions, we are not making ourselves nor our family members and loved ones available to these amazing spiritual gifts that are waiting to be delivered as the portal to the next realm, call it death, open to us. So we are, and you're right, pre-modern cultures understood this. Like I'm thinking of Ars Moriendi in the Middle Ages, where throughout Europe, monasteries were where people went to die. The monks would take care of them. The nuns would take care of them. The beautiful chapel music, the hymns and vespers singing. They even had the right music that would work. Keep in mind, frequency, the right vibration of music to attune to the dying and actually provide an energetic bridge to the next life through their love, through the music. It was all integrated. And this was a big event. Though these towns where these monasteries were, news would get out, Aunt Louise is dying. Let's go to the monastery. Let's gather around her. They knew what a great event this was. And then afterwards or during it, they would connect with each other. They would feel the love coming through. Some would have these profound spiritual experiences. They didn't call them shared death experiences, at least as far as we can tell. A lot is lost in translation here. But this is my theory, is the previous cultures, people knew the beauty, the majesty, the gifts that live in a death when it is done consciously, in a way that is loving with receptivity to death. We cannot just be accepting of death. We have to say, death, I claim you as my friend because my only alternative is to resist you. And I can't do that because that is unhealthy to resist death. You don't want to invite it in, but when death comes, our job is to be present and receptive so that we can receive all the gifts that death offers us.
Thank you. I'm going to go another weird place here today, which is before my wife, Jessica, came in my life, I had two very special and sacred girls, my dogs. I don't even know if we can call them both dogs. One was a coyote mix, about 2/3 coyote. She was with me till a little over 17 years of age. And the other one was a service dog by the name of Sawa. Kind of looked like Balfour out of the Never-Ending Story. And first, when Pumpkin's time, she was about I don't know, it was a month or two from passing. We were in Vermont. We were staying at a hotel. We were on this big book tour, and a Tibetan woman at the hotel or motel said, "Your dog's going to be passing soon. Please promise me you will let her go naturally." And when the time came, and it happened fast after that, it was wild. This woman, how she came in our path. When the time came, we found that, and she had not struggled, but she had been with cancer for, I guess it was 10 years, and had been amazing. But when the time came, she was comfortable on the grass. She wasn't comfortable in the house. And so we spent the last day and the last evening sitting on the grass with her. In fact, she played with some grasshoppers on her last day, like to point out life and how great life is. And she had us take her downtown, and there was a concert going on, and she managed to edge her way forward. And they were, of course, playing Don't Worry, Be Happy. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So her last song at the last concert, Don't Worry, Be Happy. But the experience was so rich and beautiful and peaceful being with her as she slept on the grass. And she snuck away when I snuck away from her for just a little bit. That's when she chose. Apparently, that was her way. Sawa's passing was completely different. Wasn't expected, had a huge fever, had some tick bites, something happened, and we were fighting to keep her alive. One was an experience of great peace. The other was an experience that I went into ceremony with a shaman twice years later and couldn't believe how much I was traumatized by that experience of that holding on too tight.
Yeah. Well, you just gave two beautiful examples of a good death that we all can choreograph for ourselves if we're mindful and if we prepare. There's a lot in that, what it takes to prepare. And then a death where there's resistance and holding. And then when there's resistance and holding, it creates pain.
What do you think happens to our loved one? And you have stories in the book of people who are just holding on as tight as they can, even for us. What happens when they transition? And is there, you mentioned loving entity, you mentioned God beforehand. Who or what is on the other side for them who've been holding on so tight that are like saying, it's okay, you can let go now?
Well, I mean, in the shared death experience, most of the cases I share, there's not a good deal of resistance to the death. Most of the experiencers are kind of awoken in the midst of their life, even if they're at bedside. This experience just jumps in. They find themselves in a different dimension, and they realize the grandeur of what they're experiencing. And so in that, the transformation for their understanding of death and dying happens rather suddenly. There's some shock to that, but most of the shock happens, as we've already discussed, when they come back here and they say, oh my God, what was that? And a lot of people, I'm going to say in our culture, I've got to believe the vast majority of shared death experiencers, A, can't remember they even had it, and B, if they do, they don't feel comfortable sharing it. And three, they may feel like something went wrong with them, like they had a hallucination or a delusion or even a psychosis. So what I'm bringing up here is that, most of the shared death experiencers have a profound experience, and then their job is to relate to it as best they can when they get back. And that's not easy for cultural reasons.
Tell me about the word accompany.
Great. So there are 4 kinds of shared death experiences that I identified. The first one is sensing, the sensing at a distance. So keep in mind, 2/3 of all the shared death experiences are remote, and about 1/3, 34%, are at bedside. So most of the sensing are sensing at a distance. It means you have this sixth sense that something just happened. Oh, and it usually starts with, oh my gosh, my heart sinks, a little bit of nausea. It's like, oh, something not so good for you. And then all of a sudden, you start feeling a little better. It's like, and joy comes across you and peace. And then you have a memory of somebody in your life, a grandfather. You may even see visions of your life with them together, get a life review with them, or just start thinking this person. And then you get a call an hour later. Hey, I just wanted to tell you that, Wendy died. This is in our book. I'm using the example of Allison in my book. So sensing is common, very common, perhaps the most common. But the second type is witnessing and observing phenomena. This is when you witness the phenomena, much of what we talked about today, the near-death type phenomena. That's witnessing. Then there is accompanying. Accompanying is when you are with the dying for some portion of that journey. So you're with them, seeing your deceased loved ones, seeing the dying, seeing the light, often progressing along that journey, seeing the landscape change, getting closer to the light, maybe having a life review, maybe seeing different spectacular light forms in that realm. The last one, 6% of our cases have this, assisting. They report that they've been called into the death of a loved one, and somehow they showed up there. Sometimes they say they didn't even know why they were there, but then it arose to them in that moment. They look at the dying and realize the dying is confused. They need help. And the wisdom, the knowledge for how to orient the dying on this journey comes to them. And they say something like, hey, you've died. It's okay. I'm going to help you orient you. And they kind of help them. Basically what they do is they point them away from looking at the earth realm and point them towards the light, towards guides and angels, towards a beautiful universe, and just help them go along. Now, to be clear, these four, we call it modes of participation. These are not mutually exclusive. Most of them, the sensing and witnessing are very common for most. These latter two, accompanying and guiding or assisting, those happen in about 25% of the cases.
Thank you. Well, what can you tell us? We have a lot of shows on angels and guides, so we tend to geek out on this. What can you tell us about angels and guides as it relates to shared death experiences?
Yeah, beautiful. So angels and guides, these are common experiences. We see about 16% of experiencers report seeing an angelic figure that can be described as an angel, can be described as a being of light, can be described as a small group of avatars or elevated beings, so to speak. What's so interesting about these angels is I was curious about what their role was. Like, what are they actually showing? Okay, so they're clearly welcoming, but I started to see that they were doing something else. Like they had a purpose. Oftentimes you'd see the experiencer in our in-depth interviews, say there was an urgency. If you get a chance to read Amelia B's story in the book, or I will say to your viewers right now, on our website, sharedcrossing.com, go to our story library and you will see 7 shared death experiencers recounting their story. And you'll see it. Now, Amelia B is one of them. And she will talk about this beautiful lady that shows up. Now, Amelia is in a very difficult, painful situation. Her son is 13 years old, dying of terminal cancer. She's in bed with him. And all of a sudden, as she's cuddling with her son, this, as she describes it, this beautiful lady appears, filled with light, radiant. But she has an urgency about her. Her urgency is that she's come to take Amelia's son, Tom, home. That is her job. That's why she is there. Now, this is another question you ask. Does the beautiful lady know that Amelia is looking at her? This is a question. What I'm clear about is the beautiful lady is not there for Amelia per se, best we can tell. The beautiful lady is there to comfort Tom, her son, and take him home. Now, the gift that Amelia has been given is the shared death experience. She's witnessing and peering at this guide who's full of love and fully capable of playing the motherly role that she can no longer play because Tom is leaving her. But the comfort that Amelia gets seeing the beautiful lady is spectacular. So I want to be clear. Does Amelia think that the beautiful lady sees her there? I do not think there was a direct communication between her and the beautiful lady. There is typically not. Doesn't mean that the beautiful lady doesn't know that she's watching her. There's just usually not a lot of communication between this guide angel and the shared death experiencer. There is in some cases, but what was most important here is that there's a role that this beautiful lady's playing, and I identified it as the conductor. This is the being that comes in that has the responsibility to safely, swiftly, lovingly, effectively move this soul spirit out of their human body and into this next dimension, the afterlife. And it comes up in so many different forms. Sometimes you see the conductor. Most of the time you do. Sometimes, as I got more into the research, I realized, wow, sometimes the conductor, you can't see the conductor, but you can sense and feel it. And they'd even say, I felt a force. I felt some sort of guidance. There was some sort of energy guiding this process. And to me, that is so inspiring to know that this force is there to manage this great transition that we will all go on.
The conductor was there, whatever form he took, and taking Miraku up, and left me with that sense of peace. Now I'm going to play with this for a little bit. I'm going to do some conjecture here. A higher level being, not meaning better than us, but a being that's on the other side of the veil or further down this path, whatever that means, probably has, as we have when we leave our bodies, 360-degree vision and understanding. It's not limited to what we're seeing with our eyes. So, of course, the conductor would know that we are there. But going a step beyond that, the conductor revealed themselves on purpose. And that was the message of peace for us. Because how much more peace did Amelia feel seeing the conductor than if she hadn't?
This is a great question. And I'll tell you why I have other experiences that make this a little fuzzier for me as a researcher. So I'll share this experience in brief, but it's in my book and it's my personal experience. And it's I don't want to do a spoiler for people who want to get want to read the book and have it unfold for them, because it really is an unfolding. So what happens is, I'm going to say this a little differently. So my father is dying. I'm there at the bedside. This is 1.5 years ago. All good. He has Alzheimer's. It was his time. The family's there. We know it's best for him. It's in the midst of COVID, and we haven't seen him as much as we would want to. And I do get a peek at my deceased relatives on the other side. I see the greeting party, as we call it, the greeting party. And my heart opens to like, oh my God, they're there. But then I'm thinking, why aren't you taking him? Why aren't you taking him? And my grandmother and aunt, avert their vision to let me know it's not within our purview. This isn't our job. We're the greeting party. They move my attention, and I move my energetic force, my mind's eye, and all of a sudden I lock in with this force. Now, once again, I'm very sensitive, as you would be as well, because I've had these experiences. I've been over there, And all of a sudden it locks into my soul, into the middle of my heart, just lights up. And the minute I realize, oh, that's the force, that's the conductor, he's in charge. And I could feel the majesty, feel the power, and feel the intentionality. And this is why I don't think he really, quite frankly, he was not interested in me, Michael. He really wasn't. He was all about the business. He wasn't keeping me away, but he certainly wasn't showing himself. I think I got a backstage visit or view, not a visit, a view of him and could feel him. But he gave me nothing other than a sense that I was tuning into him. And I don't even know if he knew that I was tuning into him. Probably, he's a pretty smart dude. But the idea was, I don't think that mattered to him as much as his main event, which was to help my father have a beautiful, peaceful, pain-free transition from this denser realm here in the human realm to that lighter frequency of the afterlife. So I wanted to frame up, answer your question. We get a glimpse. Maybe, I think in some cases, I totally agree with you that in Amelia's case, I believe that lovely lady was there. The beautiful lady was there for Amelia as well. And I think there's some other data point in that. The lady stopped, took a pause, and in a certain way, she may have been all about business, but while Amelia was locking into her and in being enveloped in that beauty and that awe and that heartfulness, she lingered there for Amelia to feel that. I think that's was the, and I'm just getting this as I'm talking right now, reviewing the case in my mind. Because initially I said to you, I don't think she was that concerned about Amelia seeing her, but I think you're right. I would take that back. I think you're correct. I think because of the way she did it, she was urgent, she had business, but she paused. And I think that pause was just for what you said, so that Amelia could experience her.
Ooh, goosebumps. Very, very cool. For people who come back with a shared death experience, this can be a obviously life transformative. It's a big picture experience, but there can be actual physical effects like healings, can't there?
Well, healings, I think the healings happen more at the level of spiritual awakening to the deeper realities of existence, of consciousness, of who we are as I want to say this, multidimensional beings, so to speak. In other words, we're not just limited to this experience here on Earth because they just were in a human body and visited another realm, saw an incredibly vast and beautiful and hyper alive ultimate reality in a certain sense. So you don't come back from that experience without being transformed in some way. And so I think that's it. Now, does that translate into physical healing or other type? I think it can if you nurture that experience and you sit with that energy and that experience. I think it does bring all sorts of healing. But the deeper healings, and these are perhaps the most important, is the spiritual, emotional, and psychological healings. The sense of, this focused on maybe material wealth or fame or physical beauty or whatever, not as important as kindness, love, caring, slowing down, taking time to be with ourselves and others and nature and breathe in the beauty of relating to ourselves in this world. I think that's the transformation that then yields all sorts of other physical manifestations. We know that if you get your psycho-spiritual, emotional life in order and balanced out and healthy, the physical comes behind afterwards. So maybe the stress that was causing you that stomach ulcer goes away. And, spontaneous remission or cure, as the medical profession might assert, I would say something else.
Yeah. for this is going back to your research in a sense. Do people need, that's a scary word. Are people more likely to have a shared death experience if they have some belief in something than if they do not?
Great question. So let's go to the research. The research suggests that you don't have to have any spiritual, religious orientation to have a shared death experience. We don't see that as correlating. What we do see is people that are in flow states. So we have just a striking number of people who were just waking up in the morning when they had it, or in the passenger seat of a car, or doing, like we have one case, Allison, in the book. She's shopping, doing this mindless activity where she describes just going through clothes, but her mind is wandering. It's open, it's receptive. We have a number of people who are meditating at this time. I didn't put very many of those in the book, but our research does cite people actually meditating at the time of the experience. And you may think, well, that means you're meditating right when someone's dying. Okay, so here's another key, is that about 24% exactly, but about a quarter of our experiences will happen moments or hours before the death or moments or hours after the death. And you're thinking, well, it's not happening right at death, right? Well, on their side, once you cross over, time doesn't exist the way it does here. So, and you might say, well, wouldn't that be a different experience? So all of us who do these, non-ordinary experience researchers, wouldn't that be a post-death vision or visitation? It could be, but it depends on some factors that we look for. Are there these shared death experience phenomena? Is there the journey element? Is there the movement towards the light? Is there the deceased relatives and elevated beings there? When you start seeing those things, you realize you're on the journey part. A vision or visitation, post-death or pre-death, and we study those too. So if your listeners are saying, I don't know what I had, submit your story to us on our website. We will help you go through it. But those visions and visitations, post-death or pre-death, you will notice the visitors that come through from the other side across the veil, they're stationary. They're not doing a journey, and they'll let you know, hey, I'm coming to visit you from another realm. I'm not in transition. It's different. And they come with a specific intentionality, which is normally to say, hey, I'm alive and well. Basically, that's it. Go on with your life. I'll see you later. So that's kind of what that one says. But I think I might have gotten a little far afield with your question. Did I not? Oh, who has them? So who has them? We do now see a correlation between mindfulness practices, prayer, meditation, yoga, and this ability to enter into a receptive, attuned space. So I'm going to take it right to the deathbed. When I'm at the deathbed, and I do train people in this, how do you be most receptive to a shared death experience? But it happens to be this way that you can be most supportive to the dying. You attune to them, to the dying. You bring your attention, which normally those of us who are meditators, and I've been so for about 25 years, there's that ability to take your attention, and for me, it's on the breath or on a certain part of my body that may be feeling tension. I'd bring my awareness there, and I just give it space and care and love and just gentle attention, not trying to force or change anything, just pure awareness. When you do that with the dying and you open the aperture of your mind's eye and you attune to that either breath in the dying or just that energetic presence of them, if you work with it, you'll start tuning into their hum, if you will. I call it the buzz of their soul. And when you tune into that, you'll start getting information. But it takes practice to be able to do that. Some people can just come in, are gifted that way. Some athletes don't have meditation practices per se, but they're just really great at dialing into the moment. So they do the last 2 minutes of the game, and they're just like dialed in, Michael Jordan, it's like, yeah, everything slows down at the end of life. I don't know if he was a meditator, but he knew how to train himself.
We actually had George Mumford, I believe his name was. We had on his mindfulness meditation coach who helped train him for, I don't know if it was called the shot heard around the world, but when he took the one at the end of the series, he had been trained by George in mindfulness to be hyper present for it. It was one of my first interviews I did on the show.
Wow. See, that's good to hear that, because that lends credence to the value of the practice to be prepared for the important moments in our life, as the athlete needs to be able to focus, tune everything out except that ability to be receptive and present. When the ball comes to him, he's got to stay focused and know what his job is. And so everything slows down. I mean, this is the flow state stuff. So in dying, it's the same way. But the heightened power of dying is that there's an energetic vortex that opens up. I call it the death vortex. Not a pretty name, but it opens. And if you can attune to the dying, and the dying starts moving, the soul of the dying starts moving in that direction, you will hitch a ride and go with it. And that's where the experiences happen. So to answer your question, to the extent that you can train yourself to be present, have an ability to place your mind's eye, its attention on the dying and that experience, you will increase your capacity to have this experience. Now, this is on the caregiver, the shared death experiencer side. I also have a strong hypothesis that the dying can reach out to you energetically, and that we train for all of this. And I've talked about that a bit. How in the dying, if they know as they cross into that next dimension, they can remember, turn, move your attention back to the human realm, invite a loved one, your loved ones, to where you are. So this can all be done. And I have a rather bold prediction, and that is, I think that we are radically, once the information gets out about the shared death experience, we are going to radically change the way we die, and people will be having these shared death experiences more easily, readily, and we'll be learning from each other. I mean, I'm just early. I'm going to be just a footnote in this development, as people learn how to do it.
I know I'm having a great interview. First off, this is really fun. This is a great interview. This is like, I've had over 2,000 shows. I don't know how many interviews, close to that number. And my heart is way open. This is awesome, William. With that said, when you start to answer questions before I get to ask them, I know we're in that flow state. And the question I was going to ask is this happening more now? So some people look at this world, we're COVID version 2.0, 3.0, version 0.0, Omicron 0.0, who knows what. And many people look at the world and say the world is worse than ever. I look at the world and say, we've rounded a bend, guys. We're becoming that electron that is about to hit that next electron state. We are ascending faster than you can believe. We are awakening faster than you believe. So I'm very curious. It's early in the understanding. Your book is going to help blow the doors open on this. But are we, as a people, do you believe, experiencing more shared death experiences now than at least in written Western history, shall we say?
I think we are just now, as we're coming at this juncture with what we've been through with COVID. I hope that COVID abates and we get, we're never going to go back to the same, but that we get a new life post-COVID that will be, less fear-based and more open to life, so to speak. But we are seeing that the culture is opening to these experiences in ways that previously did not happen. And a great example in our popular media is Betty White's deathbed scene only 3 weeks ago. The press took it up. The culture took it up. And they reported. The caregiver that was with Betty reports that Betty was dying. She was tired, unresponsive. And then she opens her eyes at the very last moments and she proclaims, Alan, Alan. Alan was her life partner for much of her life and her soulmate. And from my research, this is a no-brainer. Alan is part of the greeting party. He's the deceased loved one who's come to greet her and say, welcome home. We're going to help you get to where you belong. But I'm going to say, this has happened a lot, Michael. There's a lot of stories like this, but the mainstream press is not that open to these experiences. This didn't run in the New York Times. This didn't run in, the Washington Post. This ran in a couple, Vox did a great article on it. Others did a great article on it. But what I'm saying is that I think that our general public, the average, dare I say, North American, is got their ears tuned to, now with so much death around COVID, what really happens? And here was a beautiful story that people locked around because they have a need to know, with almost 900,000 people having died from COVID, it's around a lot of people. They want to know what's going on here, really. I don't really know what this death is about. And Betty White's experience landed right in the soft belly of America, who wanted to know what this is. And this was a great factual story that just gave so much light and so much joy to people. So yes, I think the openness is happening.
Thank you. We had a beautiful interview recently on last words of the dying, and to quote Steve Jobs, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow."
Yes, absolutely. And I would say that was his sister Mona Simpson, who reported that, is basically giving us reporting on the glimpse that Steve was having of where he was going. And that's it. And that's a shared death experience in a certain way.
What is, and we'll begin to wind this down. I could keep talking to you for hours. I hope we're doing all right on time. This is just way too much fun. But what in the world, because I think this is as critical as anything. It's a paradigm shifter. What are continuing bonds?
Oh, beautiful. So continuing bonds is this therapeutic model that is being, I should say it's been around since the 90s, but it's really growing in interest because in grief and bereavement therapy. And the reason why is traditional grief and bereavement therapy focused on letting go and moving on. So you have a life partner of 50 years and you go to see your grief bereavement therapist, of which I'm trained as well as a psychotherapist. And I was trained to say, let's grieve this. Let's cry. Let's weep. Let's emote. Let's express. And then you'll get over this and you'll have another relationship that will replace essentially this relationship. That's traditional grief and bereavement therapy. I see you put your hands on your heart there. It's like, you don't want that for you and Miraku. No way. And yet traditional psychotherapy thought it was a bit ill-advised to support people in maintaining these relationships with the dead. There's nothing in it. It's just painful. It's not going to give them anything. Well, continuing bonds sees this differently. They assert, and I'm one of the therapists in this model, we assert a human death ends a human life. It does not end the relationship. The relationship is sacred. We do not want to let go of those people who have been so central in our lives, those who we have shared our lives, who we expressed and shared love, those who we are so deeply connected to that when they die, it is our work on our terms to, in a certain sense, recraft that relationship. That's our option. We don't have to do anything particularly, but if we feel inclined, inspired, drawn to continue that relationship, if we have experiences, as you have, Michael, and I have with many of my deceased relatives and friends, we can healthily work at what is the communication we're receiving from them. What are we giving out to them? What are we asking of them? What are we receiving back? How do we work this relationship? A good continuing bonds therapist will allow you to affirm the communication you think you're getting, discern what that communication is about, what it's asking of you, what it's offering of you, and then essentially encourage you to find the right response to that communication, the right expressions of that communication with this departed loved one. So the relationship goes on. That is the continuing bond. The continuing bond survives and goes through. It evolves, it transforms, but it can even be stronger, albeit different, when your loved one is no longer in human form.
Woohoo! When Miraku, and thank you for doing this, when Miraku transitioned, it was a very short period of time that the writing to her and from her in my automatic writing was of the level of baby to father. And then it switched, and you got the understanding that she's an elder, very much so in her own right. That was just the role she was going to play, and has so much wisdom on the other side to share, as do all of our loved ones. Once we've left this kind of body, amnesic body, that we play a role here. As Don Miguel Ruiz, who we've had on the book The Actor, we play a role this lifetime, and we leave the role behind, and that wisdom, that deep, rich wisdom of, I believe, millions and millions of lifetimes unfolds. And when we have that continuing bond, we can tap into that.
That's right. When we honor that bond, when we give it life, life takes on its own evolution that invites us to participate. And then it's a relationship. So it's, you and Miraku working this out, and it's beautiful.
Thank you. Last few questions. First off, due to the fact that I have a rooster who I will probably introduce you to at the very end. You saw him taking flight here right before the start of the show. What in the world is intense bird song, and what does it have to do with anything?
In the story that you're referring to, we have a man dying, elderly man, Larry. And Larry has at his bedside Sarah, his daughter, and his granddaughter, Sarah. The three of them are there. He is largely unresponsive. He's sleeping, and as we'll see, very close to death. At the moment, just before he dies, the birds at his window start going bonkers, crazy. They're like, as Sarah and Leslie describe it, it was a cacophony of beautiful music, though. It's just like they never heard such birds just playing and expressing joy, and just they said it was like, there was like, I don't even know how many there were, but it was just so beautiful, this noise. And Larry opens his eyes for a moment, big smile on his face, looks to the window at the birds, smiles again, looks at his daughter and niece, closes his eyes, and dies. Now, just after that, moments later, Leslie describes looking through that same window, and she has a vision. She sees her father embracing arm in arm with his family of origin, his beloved mother, who took care of the three other boys, I believe it was. And Larry had been estranged from one of his brothers, but they're all embracing. And Larry looks back at Leslie and communicates telepathically, "We're all good now. All that remains is love." And for Leslie to know that her father is alive and well with his family of origin, healed and happy, and continuing his journey. And it's really important. He's walking away. They're all moving away. They're on this journey. There's the greeting party of his nuclear family greeting him, and there's the journey moving forward. Beautiful story. And the birds hearkened it. The birds hearkened the journey.
From what I know of birds, first off, having lived on Maui, we had these trees near us where there were thousands and thousands of birds that would sing at sunset, which was just incredible. What I know from Rue is he can see, best I can come up with is he can see emotions. Almost like if you're on Twitter or Periscope or Facebook Live, or if you see little hearts come up off of somebody, if if something positive and receptive is said. If I'm in another room and I go into a heart space, you will hear him he makes some sounds for love or sounds for hugs. He loves it when my wife and I will hug. And if we're hugging in another room, he will know. He doesn't have to be able to see it, and he will make the hug sound. He also knows if I have a bad thought, if there's a thought of some sort of danger or worry, and he'll start screaming from rooms away. Birds are so incredibly attuned to emotion in a different way than we understand. And so the question in this dance was, were the birds, a portal was opening up, and I'm guessing the birds were singing for the portal opening up, and the birds were just the right thing for her dad to recognize the birds. But there was this recognition from the birds of what was going on.
Absolutely. We have we call these, I should say, as I studied this, that I was most focused on the shared death experience, but people would share a lot of other end-of-life experiences, one of them being end-of-life synchronicities, before death, time of death, and after death. And we see animals responding, mammals and other types of, I call them sentient beings, emotionally seeming to attune to what's going on, and birds, as you've given an example of, Rue being empathically connected. Well, of course, at the time of death, this big event, this big emotional event, spiritual event, they're tuned in and we see it. I even have an example, well, a number of these examples, where a person, so this is not in the book, but this is Sarah, and Sarah's mother dies. But the last time she saw her, she wrapped a sacred one, like a scarf around her. She had to leave to go back to California. This was in New Hampshire. She wrapped around her mother's altar in a particular formation, her scarf. It was like a figure 8 formation, a very unique, distinct formation. Her mother died about a week later. And the minute she got the news, she went out on a canyon hike here in Santa Barbara. She's walking up, and this bird, a hawk, we have lots of them here, gets super close to her. And the minute Sarah makes contact with this hawk, the bird starts doing that figure 8 formation that she laid the scarf in. And she said, and she's like, oh, wow. And I say, like you can say, oh, well, birds fly in figure 8. I mean, the skeptics will say whatever. But the important thing is Sarah looked at this bird. She's on this trail all the time. And she doesn't notice she noticed the birds flying close to her. But what she really notices is, wait a minute, that bird's doing a figure 8 formation in a very specific way. And then all of a sudden it goes off in her heart. She goes, oh, that's the scarf. That's why I left my mom. It's my mom. She's saying, thank you. She's saying, I'm alive and well. She's saying, I'm here.
No words. It's a giant woohoo, but it's also without words. Wow. I'll sell you Steve Jobs. Wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. On that note, William, where can people go to find your beautiful book, to find your work, to find your research, and to find out more?
Well, I appreciate you asking that. Yeah. So sharedcrossing.com is our website, and our organization is committed to transforming people's relationships to end of life through raising awareness about these profound, spiritually transformative end of life experiences. So that's what we do. We bring people together. We do it in different ways. You can see on our website, we have a variety of events and things we're doing. There's also, I want to remind people about the story library. because there you can see shared death experiences. We also offer a bunch of programs. You can see them there, all about preparing for a conscious, connected, and loving end-of-life experiences, and learning about these shared death experiences and other events like that. And I do events with Raymond Moody and others in the field who are
dear friend.
Yeah, just beautiful. Yeah, Raymond's just, a saint, a founder, a giving person. And so people who want to get involved with that, that's coming up. And the other thing to say is, yes, my book is the most detailed kind of expose presenting the shared death experience in its many forms with typologies and modes of participation led with beautiful stories. I really wanted this to be done so that people feel and sense the power of the experience. And then we later lay out the different format, the pattern, which is so identifiable. And then we talk about, the book talks about why this is so important, because it is. We can transform end of life care and the way we, not just the way we die, but the way we live, because knowing of these experiences.
One more time with the URL, William.
sharedcrossing.com.
Thank you. On that note, any last words of wisdom that you think our loved ones, the conductor, angels, guides, or just from your own journeys yourself, any last words of wisdom that you want to share with us today?
Trust this life. And that includes death. Trust it all. Be open and receptive.
That works for me. Woohoo! So for everyone out there, wait. Did you want to see Rue first?
Oh, got to see Rue.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
You've been holding out Rue. Yeah.
1 second. I'm like, wait a second. We're ending this before I bring Rue. I've been talking about him this whole time.
Oh, Rue is so beautiful.
There we go.
Rue is big.
He's as big as they get. He
Yeah.
is huge.
Wow, Rue. So cute.
There we are.
Wow.
And
Rue.
so attuned, so gentle, and so incredibly attuned.
Yeah.
So this has been brilliant. I cannot thank you enough, William. As I wrap this up, this is why I do this show. This is the work you're doing. I want to blast it out to the world because it changes lives. It changes deaths. It changes. This is a gift that's been around forever. It's part of the human code. It's part of the code of the universe. We just, we didn't have a primer, and now you're giving us one again.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a real honor to be on your show here and to engage with you, because your questions get right to the heart of the matter, and I appreciate that, because we go there.
You're so welcome. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get at heaven's door, and begin learning and living from SDEs today. And above and beyond all else, shine bright. Woohoo! Oh my, what a brilliant interview. This is why I do the show. This is why I do the show, because people like William are changing lives and changing how we look at the world and changing how we navigate the world. You've got to get at heaven's door. Oh my God. On that note, you also need to pick up your copy. Rue, can you hold it up here? The automatic writing experience. Because when you learn how to write in automatic writing, basically you can channel your loved ones. You can hear from your loved ones on the other side of the veil, clear as day. So get your copy, of course, all your local booksellers. That's what I recommend the most, on Amazon, or let me teach it to you live. That's the quickest, easiest way. Come on over to automaticwriting.com and sign up for our next class and get a whole video-based program as well. That's at automaticwriting.com. If you like this, we're also a podcast, so you can listen on your spin bike, you can listen on your drive, you can find us on iTunes or anywhere you ingest your podcasts. Big thumbs up if you like this. Please share with your loved ones. everywhere. And join us every Monday night for live events with me. Bring your questions. YouTube live events, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, every Monday night on YouTube. Join us for our School of Mystics as well, every Wednesday night, 4 Wednesdays a month. You can find that at InspireNationUniversity.com, because if you are attuned to anything I'm sharing here, then you're a mystic or a mystic in training. And we're going to help bring out that inner mystic in you so that you can live on both sides of the veil at the same time. Here's a link to the next amazing show. Love you guys so much. Keep on shining bright. Woohoo! What do you think, Rue?